Hey everybody, this is Russ from Metro Game Core. I just got back yesterday from a trip to New York City, and every time I go on one of these trips, I like to do a recap video, basically talking about, the devices I brought with me, the games that I played, and then also, some of the things I saw and did while I was there. Now, the trip itself was business related. It was for the YouTube channel, but I'm not allowed to talk about it until next weekend, and so I'll make another video about that stuff later on. This one's going to be about all the fun stuff that we did and just traveling in general with handhelds to New York City. Now, traveling from Hawaii to New York is pretty far. It's like 11 hours depending on which direction you're going. And so we had a lot of time on the plane to, play video games and stuff like that. But then also we had 3 solid days in the city as well to cram in as much stuff as we could. And so I think this video can be fun in a couple different ways. For example, if you plan on going on a long flight here pretty soon, I'll talk about what I packed and why. But then also if you are planning on going to New York City, we'll talk about some of the places we visited, which included the Nintendo store, and no, I didn't get arrested. But then also, some places to eat as well. And so without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, let's start by talking about what I packed. And by this, I don't mean like my checked luggage, like my clothes or anything, but really my carry-on stuff, especially because we're talking about a long flight. And I found the best thing for me when it comes to carry-on luggage is a backpack with lots of compartments. I've been using this one from North Face for almost 10 years at this point. It was pretty expensive, I think around $80 when I first bought it, but I have definitely got my money's worth out of it. In fact, I'm almost ready for an upgrade. Now inside the main compartment of my backpack in the bottom, I have my electronics bag, and I've had this thing forever as well, almost 10 years at this point. And I bought this for cheap on Amazon. I bet there are much better ones out nowadays. Anyway, this bag in particular has 2 different compartments. The top one is all of my cables. So up top you can see I have charging cables for like my watch and my phone, as well as a couple other adapters. And then down below in this same compartment, I have my longer cables and then like wired headphones, as well as my AirPods if I wanted to use them. So pretty simple setup here, including like an additional SD card in case I need extra storage for my camera. Now underneath I have all the exciting stuff. So first up is going to be my USB charging brick. And this is a 100-watt brick from Ugreen. I've been using this for about a year at this point. It's got 4 different plugs, so I really like that. It's always nice to have just one single charging solution for all of your devices. In addition, I brought my new camera. This is the Sony a6700. This is actually the top-down camera I've been using for the past few videos. What I like about this is that it's small and compact and super travel-friendly, and so I'm probably going to be using this instead of my phone for most of my travel footage going forward. Next, I have my noise-canceling headphones. These are also pretty old, about 6 or 7 years old at this point, but they definitely work well. And then finally, I brought a USB battery bank, and these are always great to have, especially on a long flight, because most of the USB plugs that you have in the chairs on the actual flight aren't going to be powerful enough to charge anything more than a phone. And so if you have like something like a Steam Deck, it's always better to have a battery bank as opposed to trying to use that USB outlet. Now also in the main compartment are some of the other handhelds that I brought with me, including the Asus ROG Ally. Now usually I bring the Steam Deck with me on travel, but I brought the Ally for a specific reason, which we'll talk about next weekend. Anyway, before I left, I loaded it up with a bunch of lightweight and Metroidvania games, things that would occupy a lot of time but not take a lot of battery. And so that was one of the main concerns I had about the ROG Ally, just because the battery is rather small. And so I ended up playing a lot of lightweight games. The main one that I played was Animal Well. I've been playing this for a couple weeks now and I'm really enjoying it. And when you turn down the settings, you can actually get it at a pretty low wattage. You can get around 2.5 hours of gameplay, which I thought was pretty solid. Another game that I played for a little bit was Braid Remastered. I loved this game when it first came out back in 2008, 2009, so it's nice to see an updated version, and it plays really well, a little bit less floaty than before, which is something that I really appreciate. This game is a mix between like a platformer and a puzzle game, and also has a very touching storyline to it. And so if you're looking for a game that doesn't really take too long to beat, but is really just kind of poignant in its story, then I think you would really like it. Okay, also in that main compartment, I had another handheld. This is the Odin 2. And as always, this was the handheld that I played the most. It's got a nice big battery, 8,000 milliamp hours, and so it just lasts forever, including an entire flight. I spent most of my time playing Sea of Stars. This is a game that I think I'm about 16 hours in right now. I've really been taking my time with it. I think I've been playing it for about 6 months. I'm just right at that point where I'm starting to forget the plot points, and so I have to remind myself as I start up the game every time. Either way, it's been a great game so far, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're not quite as busy as I am all the time. I also knocked out a couple more levels of Super Mario Wonder. This is a game that I've really been savoring, and so I have no rush to actually beat this game anytime soon. I just kind of pick it up and play a level or two here and there. Now, as far as other gaming devices are concerned, I did bring a couple others. One of them was actually my FPGA GBC. And I didn't really bring this to play it, even though I think it would be a great travel companion. I really just wanted to use it in the thumbnail because I knew I was going to be taking a picture in front of the Nintendo store, and I thought this would be a great match. And I do think it's always good to bring a small handheld with you, which is why I brought one more, which is the Anbernic RG35XX And this one I did bring for the purpose of playing games, and this was mostly going to be for, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, stuff like that. Now we have 4 different operating systems to choose from right now with this device. I ended up going with MIUI because it has a quick save and quick load, and so I thought that would be really handy, especially when you're on travel. And so that was definitely helpful, but I will mention also that the quick start on it is not super fast. It takes about 18 seconds to boot the device altogether. Now, just yesterday, MIUI had an update, and I loaded it up this morning, and it's pretty awesome. It allows you to be able to close the device and put it to sleep, much like you can on the stock operating system. And I think this is an excellent feature for when you're on travel. For example, say you're just sitting there and waiting for your flight to start, and you can play a game, but then you hear that the boarding is starting, so you can close it up, put it to sleep, and then once you're back on the plane, you can open it up and start playing again. Now, battery life when on standby with this device is still not great. It's about 4% per hour, and so this is definitely not something you want to close up and leave overnight, but when you're on travel, you just need to close it for a few minutes or maybe an hour. I think it'll be perfect. Another thing I really appreciated about this device when I was on travel was just the tactile controls. I ended up playing a few levels of Super Mario World and just marveling at how precise the controls were. I think if you want to play platformers like this, it's going to be an excellent fit. And so I've been pretty positive about the RG35XX and I have to say that taking it in a real-world scenario, like taking it on travel, has been excellent. I love the fact that it doesn't need a case, that you can just throw it in your bag. It's a clamshell, so it's going to cover the screen anyway. And so as a result, yeah, I think when you're talking about getting a lightweight device for travel, this one should be on your list. And then finally, knowing that it was a long flight, we also packed a snack and drink. And so I wanted to show off the idea that my wife had because it was pretty awesome. So she ended up taking a hobby box, those things that you would put like beads inside or maybe a tackle box. And then she threw a bunch of snacks in there, each in their own compartment. And this was awesome because we had a mixture of like savory as well as sweet. And so this was kind of fun to use while on a flight. And it was kind of cheap to get it, and it was also watertight. And so I thought that was pretty great. And so we each had one of these, and she tailored those to our individual taste preferences, so I thought that was pretty awesome of her, and so I wanted to show that off as an idea as well. Okay, so that's what I packed and why, so now let's talk about actually getting to New York and the experience while we were there. And to give you some background, I'm pretty comfortable traveling around in New York City. I've been there about a dozen times, and we were in Midtown, so just in Manhattan, which is pretty easy to get around in. And so no issues there. Additionally, my wife used to live in New York City. She used to be a flight attendant. And so as a result, she's the perfect person to travel to the city with because she knows exactly where to go. So that's always great. Now it's the beginning of summer in New York, so it's one of the best times to go because it's not too hot yet, but then also everything is nice and green. And so it was just a perfect time to go. And even though we did ride the subway here and there, most of the time we just decided to walk because it was so nice outside. So let's talk about some of the things that we did while we were there. We'll start with the Whitney Museum of American Art. Now, this is my first visit to the museum, but I really enjoyed it. They had some really interesting pieces in terms of modern art, but then also if you go on the roof, you have a really nice view of the skyline. In fact, it's right there in the middle of the meatpacking district, and so you can see the Statue of Liberty, you can also see the One World Trade Center, and then also the Empire State Building, all from the same view, and that was pretty great. It's also within walking distance of Little Island, which is free to go to, and it's just got a lot of grass and trees and stuff, so just a nice place to walk around, especially in the summertime. Another place we visited while we were there is in Tribeca, so we went to the old firehouse where they'd filmed a lot of the outside scenes for Ghostbusters, so this was pretty cool. Speaking of Ghostbusters, another thing we did is we went to the New York Public Library where they filmed some scenes there as well. Now, I had never been inside the library before, but of course everybody knows the lions outside and all of that, but one of the neat things is that we were there at the perfect time to be able to go into the reading rooms. That's only open between 10 and 11 every day, and we just happened to be there right at 10. And all of this is free to go to, and the building itself is just beautiful. And so this was pretty awesome to just get out of the sun for a little bit and see something that was really kind of ornate and nice. We also did a couple pretty touristy things like going over to Rockefeller Center. We've been there a few times, but it's always nice to check it out. And it's also right next to the Nintendo store, which we'll talk about later. And I think if you're visiting Manhattan, it's definitely a must-see location. It's a little bit crowded, but it's cool to see, like NBC Studios, stuff like that. Moving on, we also went into the theater district and caught a Broadway show. It's my first time actually watching a production in New York City, and so this was pretty awesome. We ended up seeing Wicked, and this was a book that I had read, 10 years ago, but I honestly had forgotten most of the plot. so it was just like perfect for me to watch, just because I couldn't really remember what was going to happen next, and it was just an excellent atmosphere. One thing that I learned about seeing one of these shows is that the theaters themselves are not super large. I thought it would be like, an amphitheater or something like that, but no, it's actually a pretty intimate experience. And so it is expensive, but if you ever have the time to actually watch a Broadway production, I think you might really enjoy it. We also went over to Times Square just because, you have to do that at least once. It's always very crowded there, but it's always kind of fun to just take a picture amongst all of those people. Okay, moving on, let's talk about food. So we went over to Chinatown one day, and I remember we ate at a place called Wo Hop. Now, we'd looked up this place before. It's gotten like James Beard Awards. It's one of the oldest restaurants in Chinatown. Now, the thing we didn't realize about it is that the food itself is not like authentic Chinese. It's actually just Chinese American, like the typical stuff you would get in most other Chinese takeout places. But the food itself was pretty cool, and it was a neat atmosphere. It was like down below inside of a basement, and so it just felt very like New York City, Chinese American, and so that was a pretty fun place as well. One thing of note, that place is cash only, so make sure that you have some cash on you. Of course, another thing we had to do is get a slice of pizza, and so we went to a pretty fancy place called La Industrie. And so this place, you just buy it by the slice, and it is a little bit more expensive than like the $1.50 slices you can find on every corner, but man, the pizza was very good. And this place has two locations. One is in Brooklyn, but the one we went to is in the West Village, so also still in Manhattan. And yeah, the pizza was great. Now, I tend to eat gluten-free, but every once in a while, if it's worth it, I'll eat some real bread. And so this is one of those times where, yeah, I just had the regular old pizza, and it was great. My wife also ordered one of their desserts called a meritosi, and so this is like a brioche bun, but with whipped cream inside, and she really liked it. A couple of the places we ate at one food truck called the Halal Guys, which is over by MoMA, or the Museum of Modern Art. And this was also a place that came recommended to us. It was pretty good. It was just mostly like rice and meat and vegetables, but yeah, super tasty and pretty affordable. We also went to a Michelin-rated ramen place that was super good. The atmosphere was very dark, and so I couldn't get very good video footage, but the food itself was very tasty and pretty affordable. And you also have to bear in mind that being in Hawaii, there are certain restaurants we don't have access to. So we get excited when we see stuff like Chipotle as well as Shake Shack, because we don't have those here. And so we didn't actually eat at these places, but I had to take some footage of it just because it is a bit of a novelty for us. Now, in addition to eating around the city, we also met up with a few people. So I met up with Carrie, or the Fox, here on YouTube, and we had lunch together and also went over to B&H and checked out some cameras. And we also met up with Bob Wolf and had dinner together. This is all part of the event that I'm not allowed to talk about yet, so you will see more of this stuff in the coming video next weekend. And then finally, for the last segment, let's talk about some of the shopping that I did specific to video games. Now, first place we had to visit was the Nintendo World Store. Now, this is over by Rockefeller Center, so right there in Midtown. And we've been there, I don't know, like 10 times at this point. So nothing new and surprising there, but it's always fun to make a visit. And this place has changed names a bunch of times over the years. I remember it used to be called Nintendo World, but now I think it's just called Nintendo New York. Now, the store itself is not huge, but there is a wide selection of things that you can buy. So in addition to your typical stuff like Nintendo Switch games or Joy-Cons and Amiibos, it also has a bunch of stuffed animals and clothes as well. One neat thing is we were there on the day that Paper Mario Thousand Year Door released for Nintendo Switch, and they had a special edition version with a paper sleeve with the Nintendo GameCube logo on it. I actually didn't pick that up because I thought I already had a pre-order, but then I got home and realized I hadn't pre-ordered it. So I just kind of missed out and didn't get that game. So I went and I ordered it on Amazon, so I'll have it like here in a week. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of things that you can buy there. We got, like t-shirts for the kids, stuff like that. But then also, they got some pretty cool statues of like Bowser and Link, and so those are always nice. They also have some kiosks with demos of games, and so if you want to try out a game before you buy it, they've got that as well. One of my other favorite parts is a little museum piece right there in the center, which shows some of their old products. Now, they used to have like an old like Desert War Game Boy. They don't have that up anymore, but they still have like one copy of each of the devices that they've released over the years. So it is nice to see all these things in one place, but again, you can find some of this stuff at just used game stores anyway. Speaking of which, that was the next thing that we shopped at. Now, because we were confined to Manhattan and Midtown specifically, we didn't have a lot of choice over those few days that we were there, so we went to two different places. The first was called J&L Game. And this place was really impressive for the amount of selection that they had, especially when it came to retro games. And so I would say if you're looking for a certain Super Nintendo or even Nintendo 64 game, they had almost everything there, and so I thought that was pretty neat. And for the games themselves, the prices weren't too bad. They were a little bit higher than I was expecting, but still, it was pretty neat to be able to see so many games available, including some that were still in the box, and at prices that weren't like skyrocketed. They weren't terrible, but still a little bit high. Unfortunately, buying hardware from this place was just outrageous. I mean, they were charging like $250, $300 for things like a DS or like a Game Boy. Even a 3DS was going for like $400. And so those prices were way above market price. I think you would get better deals if you just went on eBay. So my major takeaway here was that yes, lots of selection, but you are going to pay for the convenience of being able to pick it up right then and there. But one of the benefits of having such a wide selection means that you might be able to find something that you wouldn't find elsewhere. For example, they had 4 different Neo Geo Pockets. Just bear in mind that they're going to be expensive, like $200, $250 each, so we ended up not buying anything at this store. And finally, the last place that we stopped was Book Off, and so they had a pretty good selection here, not quite as big as that last place, but the nice thing was that the prices were a lot better. For example, with Game Boy hardware, it was about $100 cheaper than the other place. When it came to game selection, there wasn't a lot with retro systems, things like NES and Super Nintendo, but they had quite a few and the prices were not terribly high. If anything, I would say the game prices were about the same as they are here in Hawaii at the same Book Offs, and so I'm used to these prices, but they're still a little bit elevated compared to like a mom and pop store around the country. But there were a couple deals here and there. For example, I found Metroid Prime on the GameCube for only $20. That's usually going to be about $60 or even $80 here in Hawaii, so I thought that was a pretty good deal. So if anything, I would say if you're going to be shopping around for retro games around Manhattan, it looks like Book Off has some of the better deals if you know what you're shopping for. Anyway, I think that's about it for this video. I just wanted to talk through some of the things that we did in New York and how we prepared for it, and then also be on the lookout next week for that other video where I'm going to talk about why I was actually there and some of the things I saw when it came to that as well. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Have you been to New York City before, and what are your favorite places to visit while you're there? As always, thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.